So here we are, we're on tour, the Two Russells podcast at the Women in Estate Agency Conference in the Pullman Hotel, London. Incredible to be here, Russell, isn't it?
It is, and some incredible people. So we've just had the kind of morning session and lots and lots of stories of challenge, adversity and inspiration, frankly.
Yes.
Not least our first guest.
Correct.
Danielle Nash,
yes,
welcome.
Yeah. So,
thank you.
Danielle Nash, MD of the Property Academy,
Yes.
fresh off stage.
Yes.
So, presenting to 450 people. How was that?
It was fantastic. I loved it.
But you were nervous.
I was really nervous, but I did the work.
Yeah.
So
But you've spoken before on stage.
I have spoken before on stage, and I spoke at EA Masters last year, but that was auto-cued.
Right.
So it was slightly different. So you obviously need to know it because you can't read it cold, but there is less pressure on that memory piece, which is why you probably noticed IQ cards today.
Sorry. We're going to do this a lot, by the way. And you said that you've done lots of preparation, which was quite interesting. So your ratio of preparation versus output was pretty significant. I mean, I haven't worked out the maths particularly, but I think it's kind of, 25, 30 hours, no, more than that, 60 hours worth of prep per hour of output. I mean, some might think that's a bit over the top.
I'm always much better though if I know I've prepared. So if I went on stage and I fumbled it a little bit at the end, but I've done the work.
I didn't notice.
So well, there you go. So it worked. And for me, that confidence comes from just knowing that I did it. I'm not the sort of person that can go on stage and wing it for that length of time. I could go on and introduce you two off the cuff, but I couldn't do it for not an 18-minute keynote. It's too important.
Oh, so the EA Masters, it's your audience almost, isn't it? Yeah. But this is an audience the whole day, the power of you. And your section, which I took huge inspiration from, was all about taking risk. So how did you land on that subject?
I just looked at kind of some of the things that I've done over my career. So I started off in the health club, which I mentioned in my talk. I then was a hairdresser. I then went to work for a building company. And then I went to work for Peter when he had Phoenix, when he had the marketing agency. So I've ended up sort of where I am through that ability to take risks. But like I said, the thing is, the older you get, the more responsibilities you have, don't you? So It gets harder and harder to take those risks. But I just thought it was quite an interesting thing to explore kind of how we start and then what gets in our way. And often it's ourselves, we get in our own way to kind of find out where we end up.
On that
so
journey.
I want to go back to the public speaking bit. Sorry. I want to pick at that thread more. And the reason I want to do it is because it is apparently one of the most scary things that anyone can do. So it's the thing with almost the most trepidation that someone can encounter in life. So there'll be a lot of people watching this that have never spoken in public. They wouldn't want to stand up in front of maybe their family of 5 or 6 people at Christmas to say something, let alone at a dinner, let alone doing what you've just done in front of 450 odd people. So big question for me is, very nervous, very prepped. You've done, and you did do, and I'm not just saying it, it was exceptional. I thought it was seamless and it was informative, funny. It was a really, really good piece of output, if you like, if you want to use a technical term. Big question is, how did you feel coming off when you'd finished?
I just felt brilliant.
Would you just go straight back and do it again?
Yeah.
Right, because that's the thing, right? And this is, look, we all do a little bit of public speaking and a bit of broadcast. It is nerve-wracking. It is terrifying for some people, but without question, it's a bit like, I can imagine, jumping out of a plane for the first time. No one ever really wants to do it, but the minute you've done it, you then feel that you could do it again and again and again. So when it comes to mindset, which is a lot of what you were talking about just now, I mean, I wonder how we can put ourselves into the mindset if we are in a situation that we've got to do something scary, an exam, a speech, whatever, where you can kind of almost visualise how you feel afterwards, and that might give you some more comfort. I mean, is it possible to do that, do you think?
Well, that's exactly how I approached it. And I think the thing to remember is there's two things. One is you don't start with a 20-minute keynote. I've been on stage and I've done like a 1-minute introduction, then you do a 2-minute, then you do an auto-cued speech, which is 10 minutes, and then you get more and more confident, and that helps you. And also I want to do it because I enjoy it. So if you don't want to do it and you think you'll hate it, there's no point even dipping your toe in that pool because it's not for you. But if you think you want to do it, you shouldn't let the fear stop you, but don't go straight in for an 18-minute keynote. Start small.
But you very much didn't do it on your own, though, did you? Which I think is something very important that people need to embrace, is that you were explaining that you've got a mentor to help you and support you. Can you just talk through that journey, a bit like your piano teacher probably, that took you on the journey.
Yeah, so we work with a lot of speakers at Property Academy, and one of them is a guy called Dave Thomas, who's fantastic, and he's a proper no-nonsense northerner from Halifax. And I've seen him do his presentation skills training. So when Amy rang to ask if I wanted to come and present today, I said yes, and then thought, oh, bugger, I've committed now. So I spoke to Dave and I said, look, I've got this keynote, will you help me with it? And he said yes. So, and what he helped me with, I wrote it, and then he helped me make it tighter, and we got rid of the waffle, because it's very easy to waffle and then you lose your point.
Yeah.
So he helped me with the editing of it. I wrote it and it was all mine, but he helped me with the editing of it, and then he helped me with the physicality of presenting.
So what top tips did you get?
So I got.
So me and Russell can learn. Yeah.
So I got some top tips off him today, actually, because I texted him and said I feel a little bit sick, and he texted back and he said, right, breathe in for 5 and out for 5 3 times before you go on stage. Remember that you've done the work, and then he gave me like 3 or 4 mantras to say before I went on. So I did all that backstage.
Did you read it out loud before today?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because many don't. So lots of people write a speech and they think, oh, this sounds really good in my head. I did this once for a best man speech. Wrote it days, weeks in advance, and it was fine. It was going to be great. It was going to be hilarious. And I thought literally on the day of my friend's wedding, Steve's wedding, I should probably read it out loud. And it hadn't honestly occurred to me. I read it out loud and it was awful. Well, I thought it sounded awful, so I completely rewrote it.
Yeah.
Because how you write, and it is in your head, and how you actually speak, particularly when it comes to enunciation and comedy and so on, really, really different things. But I bet, so to you it's an obvious question. Yeah, of course I read it out loud. I bet lots of people don't.
No, I don't think they do. And to be fair, it's a completely valid question, because the first one I wrote doesn't look anything like. I ended up on version 6, and I wrote it, and I like writing, but it was almost like not a press release, but it was very formal, and it was written like as though it was for a written piece, like an auditorium or something.
And it didn't sound natural. Yeah.
No, and then I read it and it sounded very formal. So if you see the version I actually learned, it has got the vernacular in it, it's got contractions, it is written it's very poor grammar, but it is written as I speak. Yeah. And obviously when you
want it to sound like you. Right?
Exactly right, yeah. And obviously I've got a particular type of accent, and I know that I talk a bit too fast sometimes. But if you saw the actual version that I learned, it would not pass muster in an English lesson.
Yeah.
And I spaced it well as well. So part of how I learned it was I could picture almost what each block of text looks like, and I knew how each page started. So I thought, right, I can anchor myself to the top of each page, and then I could do it.
Yeah. I think it came across brilliantly and naturally, but in the content that you were talking about, I love the piece that you talked about. Your career hadn't happened in a straight line, that it was a bit of a squibble and got derailed. But the theme of today is empowering, the power of you, and the rise of women being taken seriously in the workplace. Sitting now as the MD of Property Academy, you talk passionately about the 4 generations within the business world. Just unpick that a little bit for me, and how Property Academy and how the wider Women in Estate Agency can help support leaders support their teams.
I think it goes back to what I said, and I think it's about listening, and it's just realising that I just don't understand the attitude that people have where they would just dismiss anybody else, either because they're too old or they're too young. You know, this is not Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. There is no age that is just right. Yeah. And the bottom line is, to get to 44, once I was 24, and hopefully I'll make 64. So
then you get a record player.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I just don't understand this thing about dismissing people. I think, why would we not want to learn from each other? So I think it's about encouraging people to learn from each other. But that works both ways. So like I said, it's sometimes very easy, I think, to, look at the 24-year-old women coming up, and they are different. But I'm different to my mum. Yeah. So every generation is different, and it's just recognising that and thinking, right, what do you bring to the party? Let's learn from that. And in turn, you need to, why don't you listen to what I bring to the party? And just that kind of collaboration.
To distill all that, though, I mean, it really is. I mean, it's absolutely the right approach and the right mantra. And I think these days more than ever, because there's probably never been a time where generations are so different to each other, because particularly around technology, communication, social media, for instance. I mean, I don't do TikTok, which my teenage daughters think is weird. I mean, perhaps they don't want me on TikTok.
You do teletext.
Yeah, teletext, yeah.
That's dated.
That's my age. Sorry.
I remember teletext.
Huge difference. And what you were saying on stage was absolutely bang on in that, it takes all demographics and all ages to kind of collaborate and make something not perfect, because I think we've established today that perfect probably doesn't exist, but to appeal to various different audiences and to take the learnings and experiences of 60-year-olds and the new now kind of approach from 20-year-olds. You talked a lot about it, but how do we actually do that? And particularly, that's kind of my first question, in the context of a property industry that is absolutely lousy at collaborating?
That's a very big question for this early in the day. I don't know is the short answer. I don't know what the solution is, but I just think coming to things like this helps. At the bottom line, I talked about abundance mentality and sharing, and we are all here. So there are 450 people in this room, men and women of all different ages, who are aspiring and adhering to that as an approach. Because if you don't want to learn and you're not interested in meeting anyone, you wouldn't come to a conference.
You invested a lot of money to get here, travel, ticket alone, every time out of work. So you've got to embrace it.
Exactly that. And I think it's, we're never going to get everyone to do it, but can we get 80% of people to do it? If you look at all the industry events, there's all different people that come to those events across the industry, whether it's negotiators, ESTAs, EA Masters, Women in Estate Agency, ICG. We are so lucky. And the fact that we have all these networks and we've got all these opportunities to learn in this industry and podcasts, and we've got content coming out of our ears, and that is all because people want to share and they want to learn. So we're already on that path. We've just got to keep that momentum going.
But estate agents and estate agency tends to have, more than any industry that I've ever encountered, this attitude, this approach that is almost like a steel wall goes up around their business. You can have 10, 12, 15 independent estate agents in a row in a high street, and they don't talk to each other, apart from occasionally to have a go at each other because they think someone's nicked a board or someone's kind of, put a spoke in when it comes to some chain information. I mean, that I think, apart from collaborating across ages and demographics, collaboration in the estate agency industry is vital in terms of learning from each other and being stronger. But the problem is the estate agency default attitude tends to be, if I know something and I'm not sure you do, if I tell you that, you've got a competitive advantage over me. But in technology, if you look at what Facebook does collaboratively, they say, look, here's our code, anyone can just have it and adapt it. I mean, how do we get to that? And I know it's a big question and it's hard to answer.
I think more than done some of that over the years of the collaborative masterclasses, is it?
Yeah, we have our groups, and interestingly, we had so the rule that we have at Property Academy is that we wouldn't have two people in the same town in the same group, because part of that is the ability to come in and be able to go, this is a bit shit, I'm having trouble with this, and to be able to talk about it without the fear of someone using that for competitive advantage, which is, to your point, is a real shame. But interestingly, we actually had 3 Oxford-based lettings agents in one group at one time. We had College and County, Brecon and Brecon, and we had, I can't remember who the other one was, which was dreadful. I've just remembered an 18-minute speech though, so that's why my memory shot to pieces. But they all took the view that if they worked together, they were happy to work together and to share, because that made lettings in Oxford better for everybody, and it elevated all 3 of them. Absolutely. So, I think there are examples of people taking that. We just need to get more around to that mindset. And I think as that younger generation come through, I think that is what they will bring with them.
Do you think it will automatically by default be more collaborative just because their age dictates such? Maybe because they're more used to sharing because of their social media kind of preferences, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. And I think also they move jobs a lot more than we used to. I remember going for jobs, and if you kind of had to have like 3 to 5 years in each role on your CV, or you were dismissed. And we've just been looking at recruiting, and you're getting people in and they've got 6 months, a year, 18 months.
And they just want to keep trying.
Across all the CVs, so it's completely normal. And I think while you've got all these people literally changing jobs like they are, they're taking that knowledge with them anyway. So actually, if you've been at agent A and you go to agent B, it's probably going to be in the same town or the same kind of patch, and you're taking that knowledge. And I think naturally, it will all start to collaborate anyway.
And there's a big education piece for employers who are at the end of your age spectrum there, to understand that CVs where people are advancing their career or moving for a positive reason is a good thing because they're just gaining knowledge, whereas we'd be looking at career for life, oh look, job pop up,
Let me just say to camera, by the way, you'll notice there's lots and lots of noise going on. That's the perils of doing a podcast live. Angie Cooney, thanks very much for walking straight in front of the camera. Never mind, again, the perils of doing something live.
But Chris is hearing us, so he's got it.
Chris can hear us, so assuming it's all okay.
Yeah.
So
and the back noise is the whole purpose. And if you think of everyone just leaving the auditorium now, we've got a big afternoon ahead, a surprise keynote speaker at 2:00. Do you know?
I don't know.
Oh,
no.
okay.
And even on
the backstage of the green room?
I think it's Michelle Obama.
That'd be amazing.
No, it's not.
Luckily, I didn't have to follow her.
I hope it's Liz Truss.
I think
no?
I hope not.
Let's talk about politics for a second, because
Okay.
you brought it up earlier on, so you know I'm a bit political. You mentioned that when you were at the age of 11, you purchased, or were maybe enticed to purchase, a copy of George Orwell's Animal Farm. Why? And did you read it?
Yeah. So my dad used to take me to the library every Tuesday, and so my mum made sure that we could read before we went to school, me and my brother, and my dad used to take me to the library every Tuesday. So we've got a big family of readers. And I used to get half a dozen books on a Tuesday night for the week, and I'd take half a dozen. It was always 5 or 6. And do you remember the libraries used to have the little scrappy books of the shelves of books for sale?
Or the old stuff.
The old stuff they were getting rid of. And so I had 10p, and I bought this copy of Animal Farm because I was aware that George Orwell was a classic writer, and I took it home and I read it. And I remember bits of it, like I remember, the Napoleon and Snowball at the table at the end, and Boxer gets sent off to the knackers yard, and it's all awful. And my reading capability was such that I could read it technically, but I didn't really understand it. So I asked my dad about it, and he explained it to me.
So your dad was not communistically minded then, by the sounds of it?
Not particularly, no. And
but he thought it'd be a good education. I mean, even at the age of 11, to start to learn about the difference between, it's basically capitalism versus socialism and the perils of champagne socialism, I would say.
Absolutely, and I didn't understand it because Dad explained it to me and what communism was, and obviously I was 11, I thought that sounded like a brilliant idea because if everyone joins in and everyone gets a reward, and then he explained why it tends to not work because someone has to be distributing the wealth, and then it depends on who you know, so someone gets a slightly nicer dacha
and as that book, a few years on, I'm not asking your age, but from the age of 11 now, has that sat with you in any kind of meaningful way?
I mean, I've revisited it over the years, I have read it.
But is it informed your politics?
Not really.
Has Gabrielle read it? Too young?
No, not yet. He's less of a reader. My older son's a big reader, but the little one's less of a reader.
And the whole event today, speaking at it, attending it, what does it mean to you?
I think from my personal point of view, it was a real privilege to be asked to speak, to be invited onto stage because someone thinks you've got something valid to say is a very nice thing, and it's a great thing to be able to do it. And then from a kind of wider community point of view, again, if I've just given people like 2 or 3 ideas, or I've just sparked a little bit of thought about something, to your point, if I've made 2 or 3 people go today, and hopefully it's more than that, but thinking, do you know what, I'm going to be a lot more collaborative, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, then that's a contribution, isn't it? I think it's really important.
We saw that before we started. There was people talking to you about learnings straight away.
Let me just revisit another couple of things from your speech, which I thought were very poignant. Men play to win, women play not to lose. Explain.
So this research that I looked at by KPMG, where women are less likely to take career risks the more experience they have, just said that women, their point, the researchers found that men will play to win.
By default?
By default, yeah. Because they don't tend to think about the consequences. And my assumption is that the same thing that made you go out and club mammoth and take risks is the same thing that makes you want to kind of win. And I think also we're trying to navigate new positions, aren't we? The gender norms are sort of being destroyed, and I think, but tradition again. So men were clubbing mammoths, and then obviously you were the breadwinner for millennia, and that is so ingrained that I think it's still a thing. So I think for your family to succeed, men would traditionally go out and they would have to, and they would have to push, but they'd have to push for that pay rise, they'd have to push for that promotion, because the consequences of not doing so were significant. Whereas I think women, what the research found, and I agreed with it, women place much more importance on preserving what they've got. So as long as they can sort of stay still and not go backwards, that is often good enough. So it's just trying to make a decision that either that's the mindset you want and that is fine, or if you want more, how you kind of talk yourself into going out and not being afraid of pushing for that pay rise or that promotion.
And how?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, mate. Go on.
Well, I was going to talk of pay rises. I was going to go back to the 16-year-old health club receptionist.
Yeah.
What would you go back and tell that Danielle?
Oh, God, I don't know. I mean, I asked the question.
You did the right thing. You were bold enough to ask for the pay rise at a very young age. So it's not as if you're having
not just about the pay
asking.
rise, about the taking of risks and the journey.
I think I'd have taken more risks. If I knew then what I know now, I think I'd have taken more risks. But I think that's probably true of all of us. Because ultimately, most of the time you can take a risk and nothing really, there aren't really any downsides. But I think the older you get, and we touched on this earlier, you end up with more responsibilities.
Yeah.
So my kids have said to me, probably like everyone's kids have said to them, I can't wait to be a grown-up because then I can do whatever I like.
Yes.
And you think, lovely. I'm not lying on the beach with a daiquiri 365 days a year. And you think a lot of, but I said there is a sweet spot. So it's normally your late 20s, isn't it, where you're sort of settled in your career, you're earning enough that you can sort of do what you want and you haven't necessarily got like family commitments. And then you go through that stage where there's a lot of
BK period, I think you call it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you've got the stage of life where even if you haven't got children, you know, you've got the mortgage and you have commitments and then you've got all the have tos. You have 20 years of have to. I have to go to work. I have to do this. I have to do that. And then, you know, you get to your 60s and we work with a lot of people that have retired from the have to and are now still working and still contributing, people like Peter Rollings and Richard Powell Freeman, but they've retired from that day to day. I have to be in the office at 9.
They're giving back.
But they're giving back and they're still, you know, they're relevant and they are contributing and being really positive for our industry.
Fantastic.
We saw some data earlier that related to the proportion of men versus women in estate agency and then the proportion of men versus women that are in very senior positions in estate agency. The trend is improving for sure.
Closing.
Is that true? I don't know if you have the data, but is that true when it comes to the proportion of women starting their own businesses? So not necessarily being CEOs, but actually taking, I would argue, an even greater risk, which is starting a business which they may stand or fall off the back of. I mean, is that also improving?
I think so. I mean, we don't see it that much, but anecdotally and from the conversations I've had here, exactly. You know, I was talking to people last night and I've talked to people this morning, and it feels like a lot more women are, but it feels like in the kind of move away from traditional like bricks and mortar agency where you've got an office, the whole thing with the self-employed model feels a lot more like that is set up to help women and to empower women. Because rightly or wrongly, I always want, you know, we talk about the gender pay gap and things like that. And I think what you can't unpick, or what I can't unpick, is how much women's motivation changes when you have children. So I haven't got any less ambition than I had before I had children, and I don't think I should be paid less than a man for doing the same job, and I don't think I should be held back or be told that I can't do these things. But once I had babies, there was a couple of years where I was quite happy working part-time because I wanted to take them to nursery, and that's not for everyone. Some women don't want to do that, and that's fine. But for me, there was a gap in my career purely because my motivation changed, and I think that's what you can't unpick. It's not that we are held back, it's that we want to spend time with our children, whether that's all the time or part-time.
But I guess that's the way that estate agency is evolving. I mean, 10 years ago, 5 years ago even, you wouldn't find an estate agency job as a lister or a branch manager where you could really pick and choose when you worked.
No.
And if you choose also to look after your children at certain times of the day, you want to do the drop-off, the pick-up, whatever, you know, you couldn't go and work for LSL or Best Weaves or Dexter's or, I mean, you know, other businesses are available. Now you can, and whether it's, you know, the likes of the Agency UK or EXP or Yopa and so on, there's that flexibility which almost by accident has hopefully it's empowered women, I guess, to come into the sector, but also to stay in the sector, because otherwise I guess we were losing women.
And grow, and you know, seeing that gap closing is absolutely fantastic. Particularly the interesting stat for me is that we went from 71% entering the industry, then down to 42 or 3, I think it was. For that.
So we're making progress, and events like this certainly help, right?
Absolutely, and it's great to be part of it, isn't it?
And how do people get in touch with you, Danielle, if they want to pick your brains more or reach out to you and talk about the Property Academy, your
can,
journey?
They can find me on LinkedIn, so it's Danielle Nash. I'm on LinkedIn, or they can email me danielle@propertyacademy.co.uk, and I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone that wants to talk to me.
Fantastic. And we look forward to your next speech.
Yes.
Thank you.
Some big events from you guys, presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're gearing up for EA Masters at the moment because same as Women in Estate Agency, they obviously start almost a year in advance of the next one.
So that'll be November again, will it?
Yeah, November the 4th, whatever that Tuesday is.
Back to see you again?
Yes.
Yeah.
We need a podcast.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Lovely, Danielle. Thank you so much. We'll let you go and get some lunch, well-earned lunch after that. And
Thanks for
really
being our guest.
appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so
all right?
we move on to the next speaker. I think we've got Anne Decker.
Yeah, well, you
next
can't say it's good night from me and it's good night
It's
from
good
him,
afternoon.
because it's kind of just a temporary au revoir for now.
Yeah, au revoir. Thank you.